Samurai blackened their teeth on purpose, ate powdered mummies for breakfast, and could legally divorce their wives in 3.5 lines. The warriors we glorify in movies lived by rules so absurd, you'd think someone made them up as a joke. Nobody did. These are 32 of the dumbest samurai rules that actually existed. 1. Imagine someone pitching an idea in feudal Japan's war room. What if our warriors wore a giant inflatable silk bag on their backs? That's essentially how the horo came into existence. It was a massive fabric pouch strapped to a samurai's armor, designed to puff up with wind while galloping on horseback, theoretically catching incoming arrows like some kind of medieval airbag. In practice, though, it transformed Japan's most lethal soldiers into oversized neon-colored bullseyes bouncing across the battlefield. Instead of striking fear into the enemy, you looked like an aggressively decorated parade float with a bad attitude. Every archer on the opposing side suddenly had the easiest target of his career. Whoever greenlit this concept should have been strapped into one and sent charging straight into the focus group. 2. Samurai had a very clear policy when it came to feelings. Absolutely not. Under the code of Bushido, showing any emotion in public was treated as a catastrophic failure of character. Pain, fear, excitement, joy, all of it had to be locked away behind a stone-cold poker face. Got an arrow sticking out of your leg? Smile politely and pretend it's a mild inconvenience. Your best friend just fell in battle? Keep it together, soldier. The ideal samurai was expected to react to every situation in life with the same blank expression you'd wear while staring at a wall. It was the most extreme version of keep calm and carry on ever practiced, where being a functional human with normal emotions was basically a career-ending scandal. 3. In feudal Japan, you didn't have to be a person to hold a samurai rank. Sometimes a mountain pass got the promotion, or a river crossing. This was an actual bureaucratic practice where strategically important geographic locations were awarded an official title and a stipend, just like a living, breathing warrior. A local lord would then manage the funds for that landmark's maintenance. So, on paper, a critical hilltop could technically outrank an actual trained swordsman. You might spend decades perfecting your blade technique, only to discover you share a pay grade with a particularly well-positioned rock. It's a level of administrative absurdity so committed it almost deserves respect. A world where even the landscape had a corporate title. 4. Samurai had a complicated relationship with money, but their relationship with debt was even stranger. Owing money was considered deeply shameful. The problem was most samurai were practically broke, so they constantly had to borrow from merchants, a class they openly looked down upon. This created a wonderfully awkward dynamic where a sword-carrying warrior owed his grocery bill to a man he considered socially inferior. To fix this embarrassing mess, the government would periodically drop a tokusire, an official debt cancellation decree. Just like that, every samurai's financial sins were wiped clean overnight. It was essentially a government-sponsored undo button for terrible money management, and it absolutely destroyed the merchants who were left holding nothing but empty promises and rage. 5. The samurai had a very particular social pecking order. At the top sat the emperor and the shogun. Right below them, the katana. And then, somewhere far, far below everything else, were the farmers who actually fed the entire country. I'm barely stretching the truth here. A samurai's sword was treated as a sacred, living entity with its own soul. You didn't step over a sheathed blade. You didn't touch another warrior's katana without clear permission. That sword had personal boundaries, social privileges, and more respect than the people who harvested the rice or built the fortresses. The katana was essentially a high-maintenance celebrity made of steel, demanding, untouchable, and infinitely more important than the common people around it. 6. The samurai battle mask, known as a men yoroi, was a work of art designed for one purpose: making grown men wet themselves in terror. These things were sculpted to look like snarling demons, twisted faces ripped straight from a nightmare. Mission accomplished on the intimidation front. But there was a critical engineering flaw. You could barely see or breathe through them. In the passionate pursuit of maximum scariness, designers apparently forgot that warriors also need things like peripheral vision and oxygen. So you had a fighter who looked like a hellspawn that crawled out of the underworld, but was actually gasping for air and completely blind to anything coming from the side. It was the deadliest possible version of choosing style over substance, looking absolutely terrifying while being functionally helpless. 7. When a samurai wasn't swinging a sword or composing delicate poetry, there was a solid chance he was watching sumo wrestling. But this wasn't casual weekend entertainment. It was a sacred military and religious spectacle. Early sumo bouts were raw, unregulated brawls staged as ritual offerings to please the gods. Wealthy lords sponsored their own massive wrestlers as a public display of power and influence, turning each match into a political statement wrapped in a loincloth. For the samurai class, it was the perfect spectator event, a blend of ancient ceremony, brute force, and the timeless satisfaction of watching two gigantic human beings attempt to physically hurl each other out of a dirt circle. Some traditions just never lose their charm. 8. Everyone knows that one person in a group project who contributes nothing and tanks the grade. Now picture that scenario, except instead of a bad mark, the consequence is your entire bloodline getting erased from existence. That was samurai collective punishment in action. If one warrior committed a serious offense or brought enough dishonor upon himself, the fallout didn't stop with him. His parents, his children, his siblings, everyone sharing his blood could be legally put to death or banished. The pressure this created was suffocating. One wrong move at a formal gathering wasn't just personally humiliating, it was a mistake that could put your elderly grandmother on a government execution list. It was the most extreme version of your actions have consequences ever conceived. 9. You'd assume the deadliest fighter in the room would also be the most nimble on his feet. Wrong. In any formal setting, a samurai was forced to move like a penguin navigating an ice rink in the dark. The culprit was the hakama, formal trousers so absurdly long and voluminous that taking a normal step was physically out of the question. What remained was a slow, dignified, deeply awkward shuffle across the floor. This was supposedly the pinnacle of grace and composure. In reality, it made Japan's most feared killers look like small children drowning in oversized pajamas. A warrior who could end a life in a single stroke needed a solid 5 minutes to cross a hallway without face-planting into his own fabric. A single staircase was basically his final boss. 10. In modern combat, the element of surprise wins wars. The samurai often took a radically different approach. The fully announced, loudly advertised attack. This was the tradition of nanori, where a warrior would gallop onto the battlefield, find an open spot, and proceed to shout his complete autobiography at the top of his lungs. Full name, noble lineage, family achievements, greatest battles won. The whole package, delivered like a keynote speech while enemy archers stood there, arrows drawn, genuinely confused. It was the feudal equivalent of pausing a street fight to read your entire resume out loud. Technically, it was about honor, but practically it was a spectacularly effective method of turning yourself into the most cooperative, self-identifying target on the entire field. 11. Everyone's heard of haunted houses, but samurai took the concept further and genuinely believed in haunted swords. It was a widespread superstition that once a katana had drawn blood, it could develop its own dark, hungry spirit. This malevolent presence would supposedly whisper to its owner, pushing him toward more violence, more combat, more killing, all to feed the blade's supernatural thirst. Honestly, it's the most beautifully convenient excuse for bad behavior in recorded history. I apologize for that incident at the tavern, but you see, my sword was feeling a bit thirsty tonight. It's essentially blaming your personal anger management problems on your possessed kitchen utensil, taking "the weapon made me do it" to a literally sharper level. 12. Forget guard dogs or security cameras. The samurai's most brilliant home defense system was a floor that couldn't keep its mouth shut. Inside their castles, they installed what were called nightingale floors. These weren't just accidentally creaky boards. They were precision-engineered to chirp and squeal with every footstep. Specially designed metal clamps would rub against brackets beneath the surface, producing a bird-like singing sound that made silent movement completely impossible. It was a genius method for catching would-be assassins. The downside? You couldn't sneak to the kitchen for a midnight snack without the entire castle knowing your exact location. The floor saw everything. The floor reported everything. It was a paranoid warlord's dream invention and an absolute nightmare for anyone who just wanted a glass of water at 2 a.m. 13. How did samurai keep their elaborate greased topknots looking perfect? By completely abandoning the concept of comfortable sleep. They didn't use soft pillows like sensible people. Instead, they rested their necks on a takamakura, essentially a small wooden block with a pathetically thin cushion perched on top. It's less of a pillow and more of a miniature torture instrument for your cervical spine. The whole point was to keep the head elevated, so the precious hairstyle wouldn't make contact with anything and get ruined overnight. It's the historical version of sleeping sitting upright, so your hairdo survives until morning. Except they committed to this misery every single night of their lives. They chose a perfect hairstyle over the basic human luxury of waking up without debilitating neck pain. That's commitment. 14. Forget your protein shakes and vitamin supplements. When a samurai needed the ultimate health boost, he reached for history's most unhinged superfood: ground-up Egyptian mummies. I'm completely serious. These warriors somehow became convinced that consuming the powdered remains of ancient pharaohs was the miracle cure for practically everything. Just pause and appreciate the insane chain of logic here. They were importing centuries-old human remains from the other side of the planet, at astronomical cost, purely to use as a post-battle recovery snack. It's like a modern tech billionaire insisting his paper cuts can only be treated with moon dust. This wasn't healthcare. This was the most expensive and deeply disturbing placebo effect in human history. It really does redefine the phrase, "you are what you eat." 15. Samurai were absolute masters on the battlefield, but their approach to medicine was, let's say, creatively unhinged. One of the most prized remedies in a warrior's first aid kit was dried bear gallbladder. That's right, the dehydrated bile of a bear was treated as a miracle drug, prescribed for everything from stomach aches to fevers to general malaise. This stuff was absurdly expensive and fiercely sought after. Warriors would carry little pouches of it on their person, ready to scrape off a sliver and wash it down with water at the first hint of illness. Now, modern research has actually found some legitimate compounds in bear bile, but the mental image of a legendary swordsman carefully rationing his personal stash of dried bear organs as a daily health supplement remains genuinely wild. 16. Forget beauty filters and teeth whitening strips. The samurai looked at a bright, healthy smile and collectively decided, what if we did the exact opposite? This was ohaguro, the deliberate practice of staining your teeth jet black. To achieve this look, they brewed a revolting concoction of iron filings dissolved in vinegar and mixed with vegetable dyes, a mixture that reportedly smelled and tasted like a dumpster behind a chemistry lab. And the reason? A mouthful of pitch-black teeth was considered the absolute peak of elegance and refinement. It was a beauty commitment that permanently announced, I have made a deeply questionable aesthetic choice, and I will defend it to my grave. It's the equivalent of a permanent face tattoo, but for your entire mouth, ensuring you'd never star in a toothpaste ad for the rest of your natural life. 17. And now, let's talk about samurai and dogs. Specifically, the Akita Inu. These powerful dogs weren't just household pets. They were walking status symbols, originally bred to hunt bears and wild boar alongside armored warriors. But things got truly strange during the Edo period when a dog-obsessed shogun passed some of the most insane animal protection laws in recorded history. Citizens were legally required to address stray dogs using honorific language. Injuring a dog became a crime punishable by death. Street dogs were fed government-funded meals of rice and dried fish. For a brief, surreal period, a random stray mutt had more legal rights and a better meal plan than a significant portion of the human population. For samurai, It was just another day of following rules that made absolutely no sense. 18. Samurai lived and died by the sword, but apparently they were also deeply afraid of their own household items. According to Japanese folklore, any everyday object that survived to its 100th birthday could spontaneously awaken as a spirit called a tsukumogami. That dusty old paper umbrella forgotten in your storage room? It could suddenly grow an eyeball and a single leg and start hopping around your house, presumably furious about a century of neglect. The same applied to worn-out sandals, aging lanterns, and forgotten musical instruments. So on top of rival clans, battlefield threats, and possible assassination attempts, a samurai also had to worry about his own antique furniture launching a domestic uprising. It really puts a whole new spin on the concept of spring cleaning your house. 19. The legendary samurai topknot, the Shanmage, looks undeniably cool in films and artwork. But let's be painfully honest about what it actually was. A mandatory, sweaty, partially bald comb-over. The origin had nothing to do with aesthetics. It was purely functional discomfort management. Samurai shaved the crown of their heads to reduce the unbearable heat and itching caused by wearing a heavy iron helmet for hours on end. Then they grew out the remaining side hair, slathered it in oil, and folded it forward into a stubby little tail perched on top of a shiny bald dome. It was an aggressive combination of deliberate baldness and a tiny sad ponytail. A hairstyle that simultaneously said, "I am a lethal warrior, and I am deeply invested in proper helmet ventilation." Iconic, yes. Attractive? Absolutely not. 20. Of all the mythical creatures haunting Japanese folklore, few are weirder than the kappa. Imagine a goblin crossed with a turtle and a duck, with a shallow bowl of water sitting on top of its head. Samurai, along with the rest of feudal Japan, were genuinely terrified of these things. The reason? A kappa's favorite hobby was reportedly dragging unsuspecting people into rivers and ponds to steal their shirikodama. A mythical ball of spiritual energy located, and I promise I am not inventing this, inside the human rear end. But here's the twist. The one surefire way to defeat a kappa was simply to bow to it. Being obsessively polite, the creature was compelled to bow in return, which spilled the water from its head bowl and drained all its power. So the ultimate weapon against this soul-stealing river goblin was basic etiquette. 21. Samurai were the elite warrior class of feudal Japan. Noble, powerful, feared by all, and frequently flat broke. The reason was one of history's most self-defeating economic policies. Samurai were strictly forbidden from earning money. Running a business, engaging in trade, even farming. All of it was considered beneath a warrior's sacred dignity. They were supposed to survive on a fixed stipend from their feudal lord, which was often barely enough to cover rice and rent. So you had this beautifully absurd situation where a man capable of cutting you in half couldn't legally sell a bowl of noodles to feed himself without being publicly disgraced. Too dignified to work, but not too dignified to go hungry. It's a financial philosophy that defies logic on every level. 22. Picture this. You're a samurai. A tense duel breaks out. You reach for your trusty katana, and it's not there. Do you run? Beg for mercy? No. You whip out your fan. Not a flimsy paper fan for a warm afternoon. A tesson, a heavy iron war fan specifically built for caving in faces. The art of tesson jutsu was absolutely real. Warriors trained extensively to use this oversized metal accessory to parry sword strikes, shatter bones, and knock opponents cold. It was the original dual-purpose tool. Keep yourself comfortable in the summer heat, then use the same device to rearrange someone's skull 5 minutes later. It's the ultimate proof that in skilled hands, literally anything becomes a deadly weapon, even something your grandmother might use on a hot day. 23. Forget blending in. Samurai looked at the entire concept of camouflage, laughed out loud, and went in the complete opposite direction. They turned feudal warfare into an elaborate, violent costume parade. Instead of concealing their identity, clans stamped their family crest or mon on absolutely every visible surface. Armor, helmets, massive banners, even their horses. Battlefields became a chaotic runway show of competing logos and color schemes. There was zero surprise factor. You could identify which army was charging at you from a mile away by their giant, fluttering flags. It was less of a military operation and more of a medieval brand competition, where both sides showed up in their loudest outfits, and the objective was to physically destroy the rival franchise. 24. A samurai's training was legendarily brutal. Sword mastery, horseback archery, hand-to-hand combat, battlefield tactics, and flower arranging. That is not a joke. The delicate art of ikebana was a required discipline for these battle-hardened killers. The very same hands that could grip a blood-soaked katana were also expected to gently position a chrysanthemum stem for optimal aesthetic balance. Just picture the training instructor. Absolutely not, Takeshi. Your arrangement of that orchid reveals emotional immaturity. 50 push-ups, then meditate on the fleeting beauty of the peony. It's a genuinely bewildering contradiction. To become the perfect instrument of destruction, you first had to prove you could make a flower arrangement look absolutely gorgeous. It's like discovering that every Navy SEAL is also required to master professional cake decorating. 25. Forget lengthy court proceedings and expensive lawyers. A samurai who wanted a divorce needed exactly one thing: a mikudari-han. A letter that was literally 3.5 lines long. That's the entire legal process. The husband would scribble this glorified sticky note of marital doom, hand it over to his wife, and she was officially removed from the family. Done. The half line is the most ruthlessly efficient part. Whatever closing thought he had apparently wasn't even worth completing a full sentence. It's a degree of cold, bureaucratic brutality that's almost admirable in its simplicity. The entire end of a marriage condensed into fewer words than a modern parking ticket. No negotiations, no appeals, just a slip of paper and a permanent goodbye. 26. The samurai government was history's most aggressive micromanager, and it had firm opinions on absolutely everything, including how much sadness you were permitted to display. Sumptuary laws actually regulated funerals based on your social rank. If you were a lower-ranking warrior and your family dared to throw a funeral that was judged too extravagant for your station, there were real legal consequences. Grieving too expensively was literally a punishable offense. Picture a government inspector arriving at a memorial service with a checklist, tapping the coffin and declaring, "This level of mourning exceeds your authorized grief budget. Scale it back immediately." It's bureaucratic overreach at its most darkly absurd. A world where even death couldn't escape the red tape. 27. You might assume that once a samurai mastered the sword and the art of killing, his education was finished. Not a chance. He also had to demonstrate the purity of his soul through flawless handwriting. Calligraphy, known as shodo, wasn't just about putting ink on paper. It was treated as a direct X-ray of your inner character. A confident, flowing brushstroke proved a strong and virtuous spirit. A shaky or careless mark exposed a weak and morally suspect personality. Every single character you wrote was essentially a psychological evaluation. Imagine being passed over for a military promotion because your commanding officer thought your brushwork looked ethically suspicious. For a samurai, your penmanship wasn't just a skill, it was a live broadcast of your soul, and every messy stroke was damning evidence. 28. The no shoes indoors. Custom is well known in Japan, but samurai elevated this rule from simple cleanliness to a spiritual mandate. It wasn't just about keeping dirt off the tatami mats. The outside world was considered fundamentally impure, chaotic, contaminated, both physically and spiritually. A samurai's home, by contrast, was a carefully maintained sanctuary of order and purity. So when a guest forgot to remove their sandals at the entrance, it wasn't an innocent slip-up. It was a profound act of spiritual contamination, the equivalent of marching into a sacred temple and deliberately desecrating it. A single pair of dirty shoes could damage relationships, tarnish reputations, and wound personal honor, all because someone couldn't be bothered to check their footwear at the door. 29. If you think holiday gift shopping is stressful, try being a samurai buying a present for your feudal lord. It wasn't a matter of picking something nice and wrapping it. It was a full-blown survival challenge where one tiny misstep could end your life. The value of the gift was almost irrelevant. What mattered was that the wrapping paper had to be the precisely correct color. The decorative knot had to follow an exact symbolic pattern. The presentation required perfect posture, the right time of day, and probably a poetic verse about seasonal beauty. A single error in any of these details could be interpreted as a deliberate insult, an offense so severe that a lethal duel was the expected resolution. A simple birthday present became a high-stakes obstacle course of social terror. 30. Forget clashing swords. The real intellectual arena for samurai was poetry. Specifically, a collaborative form called renga. This was an intricate game where one participant composed the opening 3 lines of a poem, and the next person had to seamlessly add 2 more, creating an ever-growing chain of linked verses. But make no mistake, this was fierce competition. Your contribution had to be clever, follow strict structural rules, and connect flawlessly to what came before. A clumsy or uninspired addition would earn you public humiliation in front of your warrior peers. These hardened fighters would spend entire evenings locked in verbal combat, trying to outmaneuver each other with wit and wordcraft. It was essentially a literary rap battle, just with more cherry blossoms, existential melancholy, and significantly better posture. 31. If you think modern tabloid gossip is dramatic, samurai superstitions had it beaten by centuries. One of the most deeply feared threats was the kitsune, mythical fox spirits with shape-shifting abilities. These weren't ordinary animals. They were cunning supernatural tricksters who could transform into beautiful women with the express goal of seducing and completely destroying a powerful warrior. A samurai could dedicate his entire existence to training and discipline, only to lose everything because he fell for someone who turned out to be a magical fox in a human disguise. Just imagine the paranoia at every social gathering. Is this charming woman genuinely interested in me? Or is she a 9-tailed fox spirit planning to steal my ancestral sword and ruin my entire legacy? It adds an entirely new dimension of anxiety to the dating scene. 32. In the samurai world, your own personal honor mattered, but your lord's honor was sacred and untouchable. A warrior could probably survive someone mocking his swordsmanship or even insulting his family name. But if anyone dared speak a single disrespectful word about his daimyo, that person had just signed their own death certificate. An insult aimed at the boss was treated as a direct personal attack on every samurai who served him, and it demanded an immediate, violent, and almost always lethal response. It was a strange priority system where your own reputation was essentially expendable, but your employer's image was worth killing for. It's like starting a sword fight because someone left a negative review about your manager online. Loyalty wasn't a suggestion. It was enforced at the edge of a blade. Haunted swords, fox girlfriends, government-regulated sadness, and weaponized fans. That was real samurai life. Now, I want you to pick one rule from this list and defend it. Convince me it actually made sense. Best argument gets pinned. Like this video and subscribe if you want more history that sounds completely made up but isn't.